Hello, you've reached Gloria with Farmstead Talk, and I am here today with Natalie Kovarik, and she's representing her state of Nebraska in this homesteading interview today. Welcome, Natalie, and thank you for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Sure. Would you like to share with the audience where they can find you on social media?
Yeah, sure. It's just my name. So on Instagram, I am Natalie Kovarik, Natalie Kovarik. And then we're on YouTube as the Kovariks.
Okay, very good. So Natalie, if you'd like to share a little bit about, who is Natalie, where you're currently living, a little bit about your family, a little bio makeup of
Sure.
you and your
So I
family.
was originally a rancher's daughter, turned ranch wife, turned ranch mom. So I was born in Southwest Montana. I was a fourth generation on a registered Hereford operation. And it was very much a family operation and something that we were involved in and very proud of. But my parents always really encouraged us. I had three older sisters, and they really encouraged us, all of us girls, to do whatever we want, even if that resulted in something outside of agriculture. So I actually was born into ranching, but then left to pursue a degree outside of it. So I attended pharmacy school and spent actually kind of like a little interim period of my life living in a little bit bigger of a city in Montana, practicing full-time pharmacy. And that kind of changed when I met my husband. He was up at our family. We have an annual bull sale, and he was up looking at cattle for that. And we met, and a couple of years later, I found myself relocated to the great state of Nebraska. And together, he and I, along with our children, we run a cow-calf operation. So we are in central Nebraska. We are outside of a fairly small town. There's about 2,000 residents in it. And we ranch. We do a little bit of farming, but we would consider ourselves mostly ranchers. And so agriculture has been, ranching, all of it has been a part of my life for a really long time. And I just feel really blessed that God placed me back on the ranch, even if it was in a different state.
Very nice, very nice. Share a little bit about your ranch so we can kind of get a feel of what that looks like.
Sure. So our ranch is actually, the Nebraska has an area called the Sandhills, and we are actually kind of right on the border of it. So part of our ranch will lies in it, and then part of it isn't. And so we're in a very beautiful area. Lots of people will typically think of Nebraska as flat and cornfields, which we certainly have that around us. But the Sandhills are very lush, rolling green hills. So it's a very beautiful territory that we're in. It's a very unique ecosystem if you've ever looked into or read anything about the Sandhills. But so we have a lot of pasture land. We run 700 head of Angus cattle is what we have. My husband crosses those with Hereford bulls so that you will get what's called a black baldy. So you'll have the black animal with like the white face. So we, like I said, are a cow-calf operation. So we basically, what that means is you are maintaining a female herd and then selling off the rest of your product to enter into like the beef supply. So that is what we do here. And we have about 4,000 acres that we run that cattle on. Most of it is, as I mentioned earlier, we do a little bit of farming, but most of that is going to be pasture land for our livestock. We do plant corn for corn silage that we'll use ourselves, and then we utilize cover crops for grazing for our animals. But other than that, we actually lease out most of our farmland to neighboring farmers for them to utilize, so that our ranch is kind of a little bit diversified. So along with the cow-calf, we actually do like a little bit of backgrounding and just a couple different other things. And one of the things we do is AIing, and that season tends to overlap with farming quite a bit. And so in the beginning, my husband just couldn't do both of them. So he went the AI route, and that's how we chose to just kind of end up leasing out the farmland, and we've stuck with it ever since. Plus, he's way more passionate about cattle anyway, so it works out good.
Okay, two things. One, share with the audience what AI is in case they don't know.
Sure. So that's artificial insemination. It's when you will actually look at like a semen catalog and breeders will get to choose what kind of bull they want to use in their herd. So there's two options. You can basically like release a bull out with your cattle into pasture and have natural processes happen, but you're not guaranteed which bull will breed which female. Whereas with AI, you can match and kind of breed particular things you want. You can look at different traits from different bulls and then select from that. And so it's just a process of artificially inseminating an animal. And so my husband actually does that process for people. So he'll sell the semen through a company, and then he travels around to different ranches and actually does the actual manual labor of doing it.
Okay. Now,
and typically just the way operations are set up, most ranches will choose to do that during like May and June. That's the busiest season. And that's also the time when a lot of people are planting. And so that's why it just doesn't work out for us to do farming.
I see. So with the large amount of land that you have, I don't know if it's required, but do you implement rotational grazing, or you don't have to because of the large quantity of land that you have?
We do rotational grazing. So our ranch is actually through our local NRCS, we are part of a conservation service program. And part of that is like, the want to protect soil and water and natural habitat of wildlife. So we do actually utilize rotational grazing. I think if you would talk to people, there are varying degrees of rotational grazing. There's very strict rotational grazing, and then a little bit more looser. And just the way our ranch is set up with like water access and a couple different things, fencing and a bunch of factors that play a role, we are not as strict as you could rotationally graze, but it is definitely something that we believe in and something that we implement on our operation for sure. Okay. I actually have some really great pictures I posted on Instagram before that one of our pasture lands that we rotational graze borders someone who doesn't, and you can tell just straight line down the fence line the stark difference between our rotational grazed grass on the right side and then our neighbors on the left side. And so it was a really unique thing to kind of you always hear about the benefits from it, and obviously we believe in those because it's something we practice, but to see it right there in front of your whole eyes with just how much of a difference it can really make for grass and land and soil, it was really great to see. It made us pretty proud. So
yeah, for sure. You said that you grow corn and you also grow cover crops. Is that the only thing that you're growing? Do you grow any type of your own vegetation for your own food?
Yeah, so I mean, that is just for our ranch. Personally, we do have a garden that we grow our own vegetables in. I have a very, very small strawberry patch, so I guess I could say fruit too. But for the most part, it is just vegetables. So we harvest our own animals, obviously. So I have always grown up raising our own beef to feed ourselves. But I do also garden. So you can add that in too for producing for ourselves.
Okay. And then at the end of the season, when you have extra crops, do you utilize any type of food preservation?
Yeah, so I grew up, my mother is actually a very avid canner, and my mother-in-law as well. So I grew up canning. My mother did a lot of fruit, and my mother-in-law does a lot of vegetables. And so I've kind of been exposed to canning for both. And so, yeah, it's something that I guess, when you're little and you grow up around certain things, you don't realize that other people don't do it. But I grew up eating, canned fruit all year long, and, not out of the can from the grocery store, sorry, like our own canned. Right. And so that is something that I wanted to carry on, as a wife and mother myself. So we grow our garden to eat through the season, but we also do it very largely with the idea of canning it to feed ourselves through the winter as well. There's nothing better than, eating semi-fresh. It's fresh, I guess, but eating canned throughout the winter, it's much better I would prefer that than the grocery store.
Right. what other types of sustainable practices do you utilize under your household?
I think we do very minimal things that are easy for our family to implement. So I try and be conscientious of buying single-use products. So we use reusable grocery bags. We use reusable plastic bags for our food storage. A lot of our food, actually, I just store in the mason jars when we're done canning. So I try and be conscientious of things like that in my house. I would really like to start, and this summer, I have goals of hopefully starting a compost pile. So we would like to start implementing that. Yeah, just small things like that.
Do
I
you
think being
have
conscientious of
chickens or
plastics is,
do you have chickens or any other farm animals besides the cattle?
we don't. I mean, we have horses, but we don't have chickens or goats or anything like that. I think
Okay.
chickens are in maybe like our 5 to 10 year plan.
Okay.
But we definitely need to get a coop and a couple other things lined up before we go the chicken route.
Sure.
I also grew up having chickens when I was younger, so it is something I would like to do. And in our family, we're actually big believers in starting you wouldn't believe the amount of eggs we go through. Most mornings we try and do eggs with a meat for breakfast. And so just from that standpoint, I would really love to have my own eggs. But as of right now, no, we don't have chickens. Goats have crossed my mind, but I don't know. I think that's more like a 5 to 10 year plan for our operation or our
Okay.
family.
How does spirituality or religion, does that play a role in your homesteading or farming lifestyle at all?
I grew up religious. Both my husband and I did. We are practicing Catholics. But to say those would tie into why we choose to live the way we do, I'm not so certain. I can see God and feel him out in nature, mostly when we're out at pasture in summertime, on horseback. And I can feel, him around me and his creation and presence. But as far as if it plays a role in our, daily like gardening or our daily homesteading choices, I don't know. I guess, he's definitely present in our household, but I don't know if it ties together our religion and our lifestyle.
Okay. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. So our country and our world is going through this pandemic right now with COVID-19. What are your thoughts about that, and how do you think that it's going to change our world?
Yeah, I think the first word that comes to mind is like uncertainty. I just think that there are a lot of things we don't know, and whether that is at a molecular level of like the molecule itself or the virus itself, or on like the grand scheme of things of like how that's going to affect our country and our nation. I think whatever end of the spectrum you look at it, it's just we're very uncertain. There's a lot that we don't know. I do know that coming from a very rural area, I think that we are fortunate enough that our lifestyle has pretty much been able to remain, at least our daily lifestyle, fairly unturned as it opposed to people who are living in a very urban condensed cities. I think that they've had to make some very stark lifestyle changes to their daily regimens that we haven't had to. For the most part, we are fairly isolated to begin with. We spend a lot of our time just out in the open on our ranch, very limited human contact every day, besides our immediate family. So I do feel fortunate in that stance that as much as some people are probably feeling a turn in their day-to-day, ours has very much remained the same. I work only part-time, so I'm usually home most of the week, and so that has stayed the same. I've still been staying home. I work in healthcare, so I still do have a job to report to 2 days a week, and then my husband still is, he's always been a full-time rancher, so that doesn't change. He's still going out and we're still feeding the cattle every morning, and we're still doing all of our chores every single day. And so I feel blessed, like I said, to just have that stability. And as far as how I think it's going to change our nation or our economy, I think it's going to have a very large impact. Unfortunately, I think at the beginning we were all kind of hoping and praying that it wouldn't. But I do think some things are going to change. I think that kind of, I don't want to say chaos, but something large like this, I feel like just what it kind of does is speeds up trends that were already happening. And so I think that stores that, didn't have an online presence or weren't focused on that, I think that was going to be a gradual transition through our generation, that we prefer, shopping online. We don't go to stores as much anymore. I think that we were going to see those big stores kind of maybe phase out slowly, little by little, but now I think you'll just see things like that happen a lot quicker. So unfortunately, I do think it will change a lot about society. I also think that maybe it will change lifestyle choices, as far as maybe more people will see kind of a resurgence back to homesteading. And I know was kind of already like a popular or kind of an interesting thing for people to do, but I think that was more out of like passion and interest. And now I think you might see people forced into it out of necessity. And so I think there's a possibility that people will start buying local more, people will start growing their own food again, and just kind of maybe practicing some of those things. Like I personally make my own bread all the time. And so little things like that we lost as a generation. I think things like that might be starting to be coming back because of COVID-19.
Yeah, it's definitely a scary time, but I try to think positive and see the good that can come out of it. And I think we'll see a lot of good come out of it.
I know personally. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, number one, I think it's going to start bringing our communities and our families closer together, for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can firsthand attest to, my oldest son has been out of school, and selfishly, it's been amazing to have him home. I mean, he was in 8th grade, so he was very, he left to go to school in the morning, and then he had sports and activities afterwards. And I felt like he was kind of at an age, where you don't see your child as much. And so it's been a joy to have him back at home. He's, been doing daily chores, and we spend most of our time as a family together. So I do think that it is highlighting quality family time together for families right now.
For sure. What do you think that your kids are learning out on the ranch that they may not have learned if they were living in another location, like in the city?
I think first and foremost, I see, and I guess I'll just speak from what I see out of my oldest son, Tad. I think that he has learned a sense of responsibility to people and things outside of himself. So he knows that every single day we're in charge of feeding our herd. At summer, obviously in Nebraska, we can get away with kicking them out to pasture and they can graze and we don't have to feed them. But during the winter, we are in charge of feeding them hay. So if we do not feed them, they do not eat. And so I think he understands the responsibility every single day, that whether you are sick or you don't feel good or you don't want to, or the weather isn't good or whatever the reason may be, it doesn't matter. Like, you are accountable and you have to be out there doing your job. And so I think children learn responsibility, whether it is in the city or in the country. But I think the difference between the responsibility that they learn earlier on in the country is to things outside of themselves. So it's very easy to teach our children responsibility as far as chores and things they do for themselves, but teaching them to be held accountable to that someone else is dependent upon them as a child is hard. But on the farm, it's really easy because there's a lot of things to do. And a lot of animals that are counting on you. So first and foremost, I think that. And then I think they also learn at an earlier age, like, I don't necessarily want to say teamwork, but like skills of working with people. Tad is always out working. He obviously can't do things alone. So he's always out either with me or my husband. And so I think at an earlier age, they're learning how to have that working relationship with someone else. And then they probably do earn or learn a little bit earlier on, because Tad has done chores for a really long time. And so maybe they do learn a little bit of independence, like a little bit earlier on. I had a friend the other day joke that she showed her son doing something. I can't remember quite what it was. She said, don't worry, like in ranch years, he's like 24, basically saying that, like, you know, what he's doing, yes, it's like way beyond what he should be doing this age, but that's kind of how it is on a farm and ranch. And so I do think that another thing they learn is like being independent, and doing some things on their own that they probably wouldn't learn in the city right away.
Yeah, for sure. You see little kids driving trucks and tractors by the time they're 7, you know?
Yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting. What's your
Tad
favorite?
can drive the tractor.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Tad can drive the tractor. I was going to say, Tad can drive the tractor much better than I can. If there was a crisis on the farm, that is who we'd go to next, is him, not me. So
yeah. What is your favorite thing about living in the state of Nebraska and ranching there?
I think it ties back to kind of just what I've been talking about most of this time, is just family. I think that whether you're on a large scale farm or ranch or a very small homestead, I think it's still a beautiful way to raise your family and teach your children some of those things I mentioned. I just think you get a lot of really great quality time. I always say that ranching is like the ultimate bring your child to work every day with you. I am fortunate enough to, like I said, be at home 5 days of the week. And so Jax, from basically birth, has been with me and my husband out in the tractor choring or out in the truck, doing different things. And so I just think it's a really great way to raise a family. And I feel very blessed to do it. And I think Nebraska too, is a really great state. I love the community, the people here. Having lived in other areas, I can attest to, there's something about Midwesterns. I think they are very kind, very community-driven people. And I love being from Nebraska. I'm very proud that I am a transplant from this state.
Good. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years on the ranch?
Yeah, I think that, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of diversified. So my husband, if there's one thing you will learn about ranching and farming, is that it is a expensive thing to do. So basically a lot of operations, some who have been very long-standing, might not operate off of a like banking note or a loan from the bank, but most farming and ranching operations do. And so in the very beginning, when my husband came back to the ranch, you have to find different ways to diversify your ranch, different ways to have different streams of revenues coming in at different times of the year, to help make those payments. So like I said, we're very diversified, and part of that reason is to help make those payments. And so I think a very big goal of my husband's is he's very passionate about the cow-calf side of our operation, and he's also very passionate. We just started a very small registered herd within the last 3 years. And so those are his two big passions. And not to say that the other things aren't, but if he had to choose how to spend his time, it would be in those two areas. So our 5 to 10 year goal would be to make, kind of lose some of the other things that we do on our ranch to help pay the bills, and be able to have the two things that he's most passionate about be the things that ultimately support our operation. So hopefully you'll see us kind of make the transitions through losing some of the, backgrounding chores that we do and some of the AI, and just being more of a cow-calf operation who runs a registered herd.
Okay, very nice. So we're getting ready to wrap up. If you can go ahead and sum up your experience with homesteading and farming, ranching in one word, what would that word be?
I think for me, it would be contentment. And I think that is actually a word that not a lot of people experience. I don't think, for whatever reason it is, I don't know if it's the way our society has kind of trained us to be, always striving for more or wanting more, or looking for something else. or if it's something entirely different. But for me, living this lifestyle and looking at it on the grand scheme of running cattle as our operation, but also on the small scheme of gardening and doing certain homesteading practices for my family, it brings me a very large sense of contentment. I feel very much at ease and at peace, and just very happy with where our life is at. Not wanting more, not wanting less, just very content and at peace. So I think that's the word that our lifestyle sums up for me.
Wow, that's a great word and a great place to be.
Yeah,
Natalie, thank you so much for sharing your story with me today. I really appreciate it. You have a great day now.
Yeah, of course. Thanks again for having me, Gloria.
Absolutely.